The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, Game Toppers, Rudiger Dorn's Agent, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board card and occasionally role-playing games. Today, it's a double feature of reviews. The Dukes will take a look at a couple of Rudiger Dorn titles, Istanbul the Dice Game by AEG, and Montana by Big Kid Games. They'll also take a look back at their reviews of The Godfather, Corleone's Empire, Downforce, and Indulgence in a Duke's sextuple take. And now, The Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And also Alex.
And you're listening to episode 183, which our good friend Steve O'Rourke, the name father, has titled Dornforce, which is obviously very clever since we're talking about two Rudiger Dorn games, and it kind of fits in with one of the double take games, Downforce. Along with this episode, Alex, we'll also be discussing the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, Rogaldorn. Familiar with him from Warhammer 40,000?
No.
No? Okay. What about everybody's favorite Klingon, Alex?
Yes. Played by Michael Dorn?
Michael Dorn. Very good. Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah. Woo. I've seen that show.
By the way, Worf is like the worst Klingon and worst security officer in Starfleet.
I will say, I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but one of my favorite YouTube videos is just a supercut of people shutting him down, just being like, no, Worf, you're wrong. No, Worf, I don't think so. Like, just a whole, just back to back to back to back to back. It's great.
Well, and also just like throwing him around like he's a ragdoll.
Yeah.
But anyway, it has nothing to actually do with Michael Dorn or Rogaldorn from the Imperial Fists, but we do name all of our episodes with help from our guild, so thanks again to Steve O'Rourke, and we've got some great runners-up, which we will share with you at the end of the episode, and if you want to participate in some of the guild shenanigans, going over to our Board Game Geek Guild number 2008, where, hey, Alex, I posted a Belongs Somewhere Else in the Duchy.
Sean, I am so proud of you.
Thank you.
I am so very proud of you.
Yes. So I dusted off my BGG account, headed over there, and I posted Altiplano, which we reviewed a couple episodes back. Wasn't crazy about it, but it's pretty good. And it's going to end September 6th, so I'll actually do the drawing on the air as we're recording the next episode.
Are you going to autograph the copy of Altiplano that you're sending?
What? No. Why? Well, if they want me to, but why would they want me to do that?
Look, I'm just saying, if you want to sweeten the pot a little bit, really get some thumbs on that post, that might be the way to go.
Is it really? The free game by itself?
Just send some Sean memorabilia in there too.
I'll send my business card. How's that?
Oh, that's good. Maybe you can get some business out of the whole thing, as long as they're in New Mexico.
Yes, and going through a divorce or custody battle.
Right.
So, fingers crossed.
Hey, you score on 0% of the shots you don't take. That's what Wayne Gretzky said.
Yeah, well, he was the great one. Is that right?
He's still the great one in my heart.
But hey, aren't you proud of me?
I am so proud of you. It only took me hassling you on both the Dukes chat, the Twitter group chat where we set up D&D times, and a bunch of other places. But it happened. I am proud of you.
No, I am
proud of you.
I meant, aren't you proud of me for knowing a sports reference?
Oh, not that proud. You're more into sports than you let on.
Could be, or not.
Yeah.
Going to an Isotopes game, baseball game this Saturday with the fam. And,
good.
And maybe Rory. Like, Rory invited us to come with him, and he's like, yeah, I might stop by for a little bit. I got your tickets. Here you go.
Jeez. Okay. I will say I went to 2 Cardinals games pretty recently. My girlfriend Abby was able to get tickets through Spectrum Brands.
And you guys,
this show not sponsored by Spectrum Brands.
You guys met on Tinder, correct?
We sure did, 100%.
We had some good discussions at Empire the other night about that. But go on.
Did you?
Yep.
Did you?
We sure did.
You know what? This is a bunch of millennial hating nonsense. All right.
We'll have to talk off air some more.
I am presuming what this conversation might have, the direction this conversation might have gone in. But you know what? I don't care. I met her there. We've been together since mid-February, and she's awesome. And it doesn't really matter.
You're still missing the point. Anyway,
what am I missing? What point am I missing?
We'll talk off air, Alex.
Oh, this is a family show.
This is a family show. We are proud members of the Dice Tower Network, and we can't talk about those kinds of shenanigans. We can have shenanigans in the guild, but not those other shenanigans. So, Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing reasonably well. We got done with a Kickstarter this past week, and that's always a weight off your chest. We're past Gen Con, and so this is kind of a little bit of a quiet time before Essen and BGG Con and all the other fun stuff at the end of the year. But no, generally speaking, I'm good, man. St. Louis weather's starting to cool down a bit, and I've had some delicious food of late. None of which has anything to do with board games, but I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm a little busy as always, but we've got, it's too bad that we're recording this now and not next week, because I've got like so many different things I want to talk about game-wise that just haven't happened yet. But that's okay. I'll save it for a future episode. But Alex, let's talk about some board games. Why don't you lead us off on the line of scrimmage there?
Well, you're assuming I'm going to talk about that one first. How do you know I'm going to talk about that one first? Just because I have it in order on the show notes, I call an Audible all the time.
Oh, Audible. Another football reference.
Got it. All right, we'll start there. That's fine. So I mentioned during our anniversary episode in naming Baseball Highlights 2045, first mention of this episode, my favorite game of all time, that I had received a prototype preview copy of Football Highlights 2052, also designed by the venerable Mike Fitzgerald, also published by Eagle Gryphon Games. This is going to be launched on Kickstarter. I was told by Mike this was going to be on Kickstarter September 6th or thereabouts. I don't know if that's still the case or if that's still the date, but that's the date I've been given. Either way, I'd expect to see it pretty soon on there. You might be asking, Sean, how is Football Highlights 2052? And I've talked about this on the show before. I had received an even earlier copy. You might even call it an alpha copy when it was really still in development.
Right.
The copy I've been playing is much, 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 much closer to what folks are actually going to be pledging for on the Kickstarter and actually going to be eventually getting. And I will say there have been a lot of improvements made to this game. A lot of improvements. So to give people a sense of how it works and how it compares to Baseball Highlights. In Football Highlights, similar to Baseball Highlights, your card is both your offense and your defense at the same time. So in Football Highlights, I'm going to play a card responding to my opponent's play, helmets matching up with the opponent, and then it's going to spin to become my next offensive play. Now, the way defense and offense work in this game is you have two different play types. You have a pass and a run. If you play a defense that doesn't match, so let's say you are going at me with a passing play and I play a run defense, that's bad for me. That's real bad. I messed up big time. You're going to get whatever the printed value on the play is, so maybe it's a 10-yard pass or 15-yard pass or whatever else, and there's this deck, and this is one of the coolest parts of this game is the action deck. You're going to flip a card off the top of that deck and then get additional yardage. So if you're doing a passing play, I had a run defense, you'd get your yardage plus whatever's on the passing side of this card. This card works for, so this action deck, I should say, works for passing cards, rushing cards for those. It works as penalties. It also works as extra points and something else, injuries, in the longer term version of this game. So that card does a lot of different cool things, and one of the most innovative little elements of this game is how much he was able to squeeze into that bit. In any case, let's say you played the same play type on defense. There are three different parts of the field you can attack: left, right, center. Your play, let's say my play is going over to the left, and you play a defense that matches on pass, but mismatches on where the helmets are. In other words, you don't play helmets covering where I'm attacking on your field. So I'm attacking left, you defend right. I'm going to just get the yardage on my card, straight up. I just get, say if it's a 15-yard pass, I just get 15 yards. If you match your helmet exactly, if your helmets cover all of my areas of the field I'm attacking, then your defense is going to trigger, and you are going to likely reduce my yardage or possibly sack me or whatever the case might be. Similar to football, you have 4 plays in which to score. If you can't get in the end zone in 4 plays, you can always do a field goal attempt after any play. I mentioned as field goal attempts work by combining the card you have as your most recent play with the card you flip off of the deck. How this kind of simulates Baseball Highlights in a different way too, or is similar. It doesn't simulate Baseball Highlights. That would be silly. How it does something similar to Baseball Highlights is you have two 50-yard fields. Each of you has a 50-yard field you're constantly working on that represents your offensive progress down the field. So if you ever get knocked back behind your own 45, that's considered a safety. Obviously, if you score a touchdown, that's a touchdown. If you overshoot the end zone on a pass, that's considered out of bounds, just like it would be in football. So much like baseball highlights, it captures that feel of football really, really well. I think this does a great job in terms of these play cards that you're playing that, if I get fooled on defense, it feels like I'm getting fooled. The real core to this game is the risk-taking. Because just like baseball highlights, where you have a handful of 6 cards and you're playing them down one at a time, and you're limited to those cards, you have only those kind of tools to work with. You have to make some tough decisions about, do I stop this big set of hits now or not? This one has that same decision point of, do I play as stiff of defense as I possibly can, possibly not getting the offense I need to score, but at least holding my opponent in check? Or do I kind of ignore what you're doing or try and minimize what you're doing, all while just going for the best offensive gain? Do I risk you getting a big play off the top of that deck, a bunch of yards after the catch, possibly an instant touchdown or something like that? A lot of these are really cool decisions in there. And then you add in audibles. And audibles work just like the pinch hitter does in baseball highlights, where you can put a card to the side and flip another card into play, either blind off the top of your deck or it's called the audible spot in this game. It would be your pinch hitter spot in baseball highlights. So that's the core of the mechanics. You get 3 of those audibles per half. There's no card that you need to play to trigger it. In baseball highlights, you needed a certain symbol. This one, you just play the card to the discard pile. You flip something else into play. All right, the positives. It feels a heck of a lot like football, and I really dig it. This can feel like a really tense game. There can be big swinging moments, which are a lot of fun. That action deck does a brilliant job at condensing so much of this game into one easy-to-use card deck. It's really elegant. It's a great solution. The one thing that I think is missing here, that I love in baseball highlights, that I don't feel as much, it's there, but it just isn't as pronounced, is in football highlights, the way you draft your team is you draft your 15-card deck all at the start. You have a 5-card starting deck, then you're going to get dealt 10 cards face down. You're going to pick up 2, put 1 to the side, keep 1. Pick 2, put 1 to the side, keep 1. That's how you get 5 of the 15 cards. And then you're going to do an open draft. You're going to deal out 10 play cards face up. I'll pick 1, you'll pick 2, I'll pick 2, you'll pick 2, I'll pick 2, and then you'll have the 1 left plus 1 that flips off of the top of the deck. You'll get to pick between those 2. That's the area that you'll be able to see what your opponent has. Obviously, if you have their starting deck memorized, you'll kind of know what their plays are, and you'll sort of have a sense of what they're drafting based on what they've taken. But there's a lot of cards in this game that are going to be a mystery to you. Now, there is a halftime adjustment, so once you hit halftime, you're going to do that sort of secondary draft again to have 20 cards in your deck for the second half of the game. Again, that's how the rules are currently structured. I think some things could be tweaked here, but this is where it stands in terms of the version I've played. And what Baseball Highlights has that's amazing is this, you're loading up on robots, you're building your team of robots, well, I'm going to start drafting cyborgs to try and shut you down, or I'm going to try and build my team to steer in this direction. And you can still build your team to steer in a direction of sorts, but you're going to have very limited information, only about a third of the deck of what your opponent has in terms of what you're going to be playing against. Now, that leads to a lot of moments of surprise, a lot of big swingy moments, as I mentioned, and I like that part of the game. It doesn't feel quite as tactical as Baseball Highlights did because of that, though, because the team building isn't quite as strong in this one as it is. That being said, I think the game itself is really cool and does a great job of streamlining football. I love that offense and defense built into one card. I love the action cards in one deck. And this is one that when you know this game, you can play really quickly. I can envision in tournaments of this playing out, if you have people who know what they're doing, probably 2 hours you could get through a 16-team tournament of this, which is pretty impressive. So that's my sense of this. Sean, based off of that description, does this interest you more, less, none of the above?
No, I'm pretty interested in it. I think for the most part, I enjoy football more than baseball. And I have more experience playing football than baseball. I mean, I played football for a longer period of time than I did baseball. And yeah, no, it sounds good. I love Baseball Highlights, obviously not to the degree you do.
No one does.
That's probably true.
Not even Mike Fitzgerald loves Baseball Highlights 2045 as much as I do.
That's true. So yeah, I'm very excited for this. You know, I was a big fan of Blood Bowl Team Manager. Is there, because both games are kind of the highlights, right? Like but this sounds like it might in some ways be more of a simulation than Baseball Highlights is.
It's closer to a simulation in a sense, because again, you have that 4-down structure and you have the yardage on the field that you're trying to gain. It's still the highlights in a sense, in that you're simultaneously doing both defense and offense, and it's only 10 plays per half. A typical football game is going to have far more than 10 plays per half. It is a streamlined version of that experience. It's a streamlined version of a drive, right? Most drives don't start on the opponent's 45-yard line, too. So there's some things that aren't exactly like football, but it feels to me like football. And again, that was one of the beautiful parts about Baseball Highlights, was it feels like baseball. And so on that measure, I think the game is a success.
Cool. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be doing a featured review of it at some point, and I'm excited to get my hands on it.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, keep an eye on the Kickstarter, and thanks to Eagle Griffin for sending that along, and wish them the best of success on that campaign.
Very cool. So it's been, Alex, a bit of a gaming drought around here. So I'm going to have to dig deep in the past. I've got one recent new play, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I had to dig deep to find a second game to talk about.
Oh boy. Uh-oh.
Well, it's been bad. But Chewy started school this week.
Oh,
her first week of pre-K, and we're getting her on a regular schedule, hopefully, and that's going to stick, I hope. And hopefully that means that more game playing going on at home. So, like, for example, Raquel and I, we haven't played Gloomhaven in a month, and we were playing once a week there. So I'm definitely jonesing for that. There's some other things I'm jonesing for, but it's been a bit of a drought. Now, that's not to say, like, on Wednesday nights, for example, last night I played Container with the stock market expansion, or investment bank expansion, I think it's called. But I've talked about that in the past. So that was good. And then I played a bunch of Istanbul, the dice game. So it's been a bit of a drought. But what I will talk about is this interesting little abstract game from Quick Simple Fun called Die Stijl. That's 2 words, D-E and then S-T-I-J-L, which is, I believe, Dutch for the style. And it is I guess like a modern art style in the tradition of Pierre Mondrian. I'm not an art guy, so I don't know. But basically it's the art style where there's like boxes or squares or rectangles of the bright primary colors.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yep. So in this game, you have a bunch of these cards that are kind of like 9x9 squares. So kind of looks like, mixed up Rubik's Cube face. And what you're trying to do is lay out cards that are going to go into the central tableau that everyone shares, so that your particular color is going to be dominant. In other words, you have the most cells of your color, and then there's a bonus for whoever has the largest single area of contiguous orthogonal colors. And it's interesting because there are a couple different options of cards when it's your turn, and you draft which one you want to actually play. And as you lay it out onto this tableau that you're sharing, you are covering up at least 2. Is it more than 2 or is it exactly 2? I think it's exactly 2 of other squares that have already been laid out. And so there's this interesting kind of back and forth as you're trying to cover up your opponent's squares, but position in such a way that your colors will be protected. Like you put it on the inside of the area so that they can't be overlapped in a certain way. It plays 2 to 5. I've only played it with 2. At 2, there's an interesting back and forth, and it seems like it might be a little deterministic at some point in 2 players, whereas at a higher player count, maybe 3 would probably be pretty good. 4 or 5 sounds really chaotic and like there's too much information to track. But I think 3 would be interesting. So it's worth a shot. I don't think it's amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but it's pretty quick at 2 players. I think it's maybe 10, 12 minutes at 2 players. I'm sure 3 players would probably be about the same, maybe 15 minutes. So it's a nice little quick filler abstract. I'm interested in playing it some more, but it's not It's not a wow by any stretch of the imagination, but it's interesting. You should give it a shot.
I took a look at it, and I quickly listened to the Dice Tower Judgment while you were talking about it.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Dice Tower Judgment, simple area control. So, all right.
Area control. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Anyway.
I disagree with that. But anyway, that is Stijl from Quick Simple Fun.
Very cool. I got in a play of a game that is a sequel, in a sense, to two other kind of quintessential cooperative games, or some of the earlier ones I played anyway. Forbidden Island and Forbidden Desert. And I'm talking about Forbidden Sky, designed by Matt Leacock, published by Gamewright. And Sean, have you had a chance to even see this one, let alone play this?
No, I haven't, Alex. So let's get something straight real quick. I know you're this big time board game publisher employee. I mean, big time is definitely a stretch. You go to all of the cons, and so you contact me early in the week. We have our review games planned, and you say to me, "Hey, kind of need to call an audible because I can't get access to this game. Do you have access to Forbidden Sky? Forbidden Sky is not out for regular release yet. There were limited copies at Gen Con."
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Man, well, that sounds rough.
Yep, sure is. So no, I have not seen it because it's not available for regular release right now.
I just figured Rory could pull some strings maybe, and all right, it's fine.
Yeah,
we had Matt Leacock on the Dutch. Yeah, I could see if I could get him, swing one your way if you're interested.
Oh yeah? Two days before we record the review?
Yeah, no big deal.
Let's see how that works. Anyway, Forbidden Sky, Alex.
Yeah, Forbidden Sky. So this is the third in that series of, I guess, Forbidden games. It's a cooperative game where you are working around the board trying to build an electrical current that can restore power to your spaceship and then ultimately launch it. And when I say build a circuit, you are literally in this game building a circuit. You're standing on a platform in the clouds, you're building that platform, and then ultimately adding wire connections to build a circuit that is big enough, depending on the level of game you're playing, to launch your ship and take off. There's some challenges in your way, though. As in Forbidden Desert, where you have shifting sands and the heat beating down, and you might run out of water and get dehydrated and all that fun stuff. In this case, you might get blown off of a platform. You see, you're all attached by ropes, and there's wind blowing around. The wind can kind of shift depending on cards that flip as the game goes on, and you're going to get pushed around. If you ever get pushed off the platform, your rope loses one strength, and if your rope loses all its strength, you fall off to your doom. Alternately, because you're way up in the sky, there are lightning bolts zapping all over the place. And if you are close to a lightning rod, when a lightning bolt hits, hey, you lost some health, you got fried, not so good for you, you lose all your health, you're toast, the game is over, one player's dead, everyone loses. There are equipment cards that can help you along the way, things that can protect you from these different things. There's spots on the board that can protect you from the effects of lightning or the wind. But it's a tricky game. You got to work together. It's one where you are definitely at a big disadvantage. I will say, playing this, Sean, we played this on intermediate mode, and we were starting to get the sense of a circuit. We were starting to kind of build one into place, and it went sideways pretty quickly. I ended up getting fried right before I got blown off of the platform. So my character, not so good at staying alive in this one. What I'll say about this one is it is more fun in a way than a lot of the other titles of this. Forbidden Island had this kind of cool element of, oh no, like the island's sinking, these tiles are moving away. And Forbidden Desert, while it can be fun to play, I never had that sense of joy that you get from that. Yeah, someone getting lost in the desert is horrifying, I guess. Any of these ways to die are in theory horrifying, but there was just something about that didn't seem as kind of wacky fun. This one has this sort of wacky fun element of, oh no, I might get knocked off the platform. Oh no, I might get zapped. Who knows what's going to happen as far as the deck goes. The storm's picking up. We're getting more and more cards flung at us. So this is a swingier version of some of these games. If you don't mind a little bit of that random element to it, then this will be right up your alley, especially if you liked the other versions of this. What I will say too is this game is gorgeously produced. The tiles are all of high quality, But in addition to that, because you're building an electrical circuit, you're building a working electrical circuit in this game. You get these little pods with metal platforms on them, on the top of them, that you're putting in place on the board as you build these tiles. So if I build this large conductor area, I don't know what you'd call it, you get to put a disc down there that's of a larger size. You have short and long wires. You have to manage those properly. You can run out of the longer wires. So if you try and build too many connections at once, or too long of a connection, too many of those in the circuit, that's going to be problematic for you. The way you win, as mentioned, is if you complete that circuit and get everyone on the tile. If you do that, and literally completing the circuit, as soon as you do so, your spaceship lights up and takes off. The battery that kind of powers that circuit is built into the spaceship itself. Really, really cool touch, and brings this game to life in a really cool way. You feel like you're on a platform in the sky, dodging lightning bolts and trying to battle the wind, working together with your team. Really cool thematic feel, and one of the cooler experiences I've had in gaming this year. I really like this a lot.
So let me ask you this. Is there any chance that you can actually electrocute yourself in this game?
No.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Because if so, I feel like that's a whole new avenue for my legal profession. Board game lawsuits.
Yep.
And
Nice.
And if people are like choking on marbles from Fireball Island, there's something else.
Better call Sean. This one, I think the battery in the ship is like a AA or a D. It's one battery, and it's not a very big one. So good luck with that. I don't think you're gonna get much business, but
All right. Well, if you find yourself electrocuted by playing Forbidden Sky, give me a call at Ramirez Law, and I'll sue Game Right for you.
Have you or a loved one been playing a board game and zapped yourself silly? Call me, Sean Ramirez.
Yep.
That's not my impression of your voice.
No,
I can't.
you're doing a thing. It's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's Forbidden Sky, and you should check it out.
Cool. Well, this next game I'm going to talk about, Alex, is one that I really enjoyed. It is Root, or Root. It's Root from
Root.
Leader Games. It's designed by Cole Wehrle, W-E-H-R-L-E, who also designed Pax Pamir, which I have not played, but I'm interested in playing. So Root is a very interesting game. It is kind of billed as a streamlined coin game. And when I say coin game, I'm referring to the series of games from GMT. Coin sounds for counterinsurgency, where typically there's 4 players and it's very asymmetric. Everyone plays very differently. And there are usually some sort of government forces. These are all historical. Some sort of government forces, and then some sort of insurgency, rebellion, etc. So like, for example, there is Cuba Libre, where you have the 2 different insurgencies, the communists and then the students, and then you have the government as well as the mafia, which kind of they all do different things. And so you don't want one side to win. And so sometimes you have to help one person so that you're able to hurt someone else. And then when they're on top, you need to deal with that as well. So this does this in a very streamlined way. And it does it in a very kind of cutesy way, because you are playing as various forest critters. So some of you are the birds. Some of you are other forest, like rabbits and toads or something. I can't remember exactly what everyone is, but you're all asymmetric and you have different things that you're trying to do. So for example, there is the race, the government essentially, and they start the game spread throughout the board because they control the whole board more or less. And they're trying to build workshops and collect wood to build new buildings, because every time they build buildings, they're going to score points. It's a race to 30 points basically. And I got to play as the true resistance. And the resistance is basically going around the area and is able to just kind of blow up huge sections. If you have a bunch of troops there, I can get rid of all of them because I've created an insurgency and all of the town folk help me. And that's really cool. And basically I score points whenever I am getting sympathy, because I'm trying to create these sympathetic areas. Whenever I create sympathy in an area, I'm going to score a bunch of points. there are the bird people, or the birds, who play in a really weird way. It's almost like a programming thing they have to do. And if they can't follow their programming, because it's these decrees they have to follow, they have this very rigid society, then their government goes into collapse and bad things happen. And then there's this one wandering, I don't know if it's a thief or something, but basically it's just this one piece. Everyone has a bunch of pieces, but you just have this one piece, and they're going around trying to collect different artifacts, different items, and they can even take items from other players, but then they have to give something in return. It's all very different, and it requires a little bit of effort to try and figure out not only how does your faction play, but what do I need to watch out for the other factions as well. And it was great. So there are a lot of times when I play a streamlined version of a heavier type of game and I come away feeling unsatisfied. So for example, for an 18xx game, there's a game called Poseidon, which is like a very light entry level style of game. And I left that thinking, man, I wish I had just played 1846. I did not feel this way at all with this game. It is, Alex, you would hate playing a true coin game. You would just absolutely hate it. I think you would like Root a lot though, because it is very streamlined. It's not super punishing when you lose a battle or you have your pieces eliminated from the board. It's very quick and easy to get things back out there. And I'm very interested in playing this some more, playing the different factions, giving them all a shot. In fact, I really want to play this again this last Dukes of Dice game night, and it just didn't work out that way because of player count and things like that. But I'm very excited to get this back to the table. I think it was really excellent. I'm really kicking myself for not backing on Kickstarter. Because I heard, hey, it's a streamlined coin game, but I'm like, yeah, I'd rather just play a coin game. But this was good. This was really solid.
Good. Okay. Is this one for the show, you think?
I wouldn't mind playing it a bunch more times so we could review it. I'd be interested.
Right.
I'd be interested to hear what you think about it. So,
well, that's good enough for me.
See if you can find a copy in the area.
Yeah, probably. I think that's probably not going to be that big of a deal.
Okay. So anyway, that is Root from Leader Games.
That's what we played. Let's head on over to the news desk. All right, first up in news, one of two very important Sean-related news items. The first one is the Dune license for tabletop games has gone to a company called Galeforce 9. It's a multi-year agreement that will basically allow them to make tabletop games tied to the many works of Frank Herbert, Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson, and, of course, direct tie-ins with the anticipated film coming, who's this director? Denis Villeneuve?
Villeneuve, I think.
Villeneuve. Okay. Well, apparently there's a Dune film, and apparently they get to make games off of this. Galeforce 9, for background for folks, has done a lot of licensed titles, including Firefly the game, Doctor Who the game, Family Guy, Sons of Anarchy, Star Trek Ascendancy. Sean, when you saw this news, how did you, as a Dune fan, react?
With some trepidation. Because it is my favorite IP, Alex. I mean, hands down. And I have problems with non-book versions of it. The David Lynch movie was weird. The sci-fi miniseries was weird. As far as games go, the classic Dune game was great, and I've enjoyed playing that. Especially our buddy Chris's excellent print and play copy that he put together. And I know for a long time, the Herbert estate resisted efforts to license out the IP for games in the very recent past. And so I'm kind of curious what's changed. I mean, obviously they want money. They like money. Also, what kind of worries me is that it's going to be going into, like you mentioned, the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson side of things, which is all the various prequels and things like that, which I'm not crazy about. So I don't know. Also, as far as Galeforce 9 goes, I don't think that they necessarily have a great track record. Obviously, they're prolific, but I don't know. I'm a little concerned. Now, does that mean I'm not going to buy everything that they produce that's Dune related? Yes, I will still do that. But I don't know. What are your thoughts as a Dune light person?
I enjoyed the Dune book that I read. I probably should read the sequel. I have not yet. I probably should, though. I will probably see the movie when it comes out. Licensed games don't hold that big of a draw for me. I think, hang on, I'm going to take a second. I'm going to look at my shelf. I'm going to see how many licensed games I can spot. 1 second.
While you're looking, Denis Villeneuve, he directed The Arrival, the Blade Runner sequel, Sicario. So that sounds pretty good.
All right. I have spotted one game that might be a licensed title.
Okay.
Arcane Academy, I believe, is technically a licensed title.
Sure.
That's it. I don't have any Star Wars games or Star Trek games or even IPs that I like. I just don't have games for in that universe. Most of the time, the games that come out of that aren't necessarily bad or good or indifferent or whatever else, but it's a case where I don't feel personally compelled to go out and get them. So I don't know what that says, but it's just not something that I'm excited about because it's not a type of game I tend to pick up a lot.
Yeah. So I'm a little hesitant. I'm not going to be overly optimistic in any way. I will wait and see, and hopefully I will be pleasantly surprised.
All right. Hey, you know what the key to happiness is, Sean? Low expectations.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Next up in Sean news.
Yeah.
Some sort of expansion to Kemet, which I tried to research while you were talking about Dune and couldn't find. So, Sean, what is this?
So it is called Seth, and this is the second full expansion for Kemet, the first one being Ta Seti. And if you recall, Kemet has been my number one game consistently for the last 3 years. So in Kemet Seth, you're going to be able to play this with 6 players, but as opposed to 5, but it's going to be a 1 versus all version of Kemet.
Oh, boy.
Okay, Alex.
Oh, boy.
How do you think I feel about that?
I think you're incredibly excited.
I am super excited because I love being the one. I love it so much.
Unreal. It's like they went into your brain and said,
right,
what kind of expansion would Sean most love for this game? And they absolutely picked it out. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
One versus many. Unreal.
I'm so excited. So basically everyone's cooperating together in order to stop the invasion of Seth, while trying to resist the powers of corruption that Seth kind of brings with him. I'm not sure how that's gonna work out. But Seth has his own power tiles, his own board, his own creatures, his own divine intervention cards. But everyone else is going to be able to benefit from the power of Osiris, the ability to build temples, and able to combine troops. So you could have like mixed formations. Man, this sounds really awesome. I am super excited for this. I don't see. I'm not sure when this is coming out.
Okay, so here's what I saw. Here's what I saw on Board Game Geek when I was trying to research this, because this is the expansion that popped up. I didn't look into specifically what it was, but I looked into the release dates. They apparently had some limited copies at Gen Con.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Which, now that was based off of a thread, and it's not confirmed information and all that fun stuff. So I don't know if that's true or not. I do know you can pre-order it right now. So I don't know what the release date is on this one, Sean.
Well, and if you want to go check out BGG, the English rules are up there. So I will probably be reading those later tonight. Oh man, I am super excited for this expansion.
Will you be able to find a group to play with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Kemet is very well regarded in our play group here.
Kemet.
It's going to be great.
Kemet.
Oh, it's going to be great.
All right. Well, fair enough. All right, that's Sean news. Let's head on over to probably not Sean Kickstarter. I actually don't know how you feel about this IP. So this is Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, based off of Saban's Power Rangers, which is apparently a thing. It's designed by Jonathan Ying, who also did Bargain Quest. Sean, have you played Bargain Quest at any point?
No, I have not.
Bargain Quest is an awesome game where you are basically a shopkeeper in an RPG or a fantasy village and trying to sell stuff to heroes and make the most profit you can. Possibly selling them useless junk or selling them the sword they need to slay the big bad. It's a really interesting game, and I like it a lot. He also did apparently some design work on Star Wars Imperial Assault, which I know you love. So, design pedigree on this game, pretty solid. Publishing pedigree on this game, also pretty solid. It's Renegade Game Studios on Kickstarter. How about that?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting combination there.
This has not been their business model typically. They had run another Kickstarter for, I think, Kids on Bikes. That sounds right to me. They ran it for an RPG. Overlight. It was Overlight that they ran it for. I think they picked up Kids on Bikes later. In any case, so this is on Kickstarter right now. It is a Power Rangers cooperative minis game where you're working together to battle hordes of monsters, building up your strength, protecting the city, and preparing for your destiny. To read from the game, it's morphin' time. Sean, was this an IP you ever really engaged with, Power Rangers?
No, I was a little too old for it. My younger brother, Jordan, who's about 11 years younger than me, totally up his alley. But I was too old for Power Rangers. I did happen to watch the new movie by accident. Mariah she had it on while Raquel and I were playing Gloomhaven. And
with Albuquerque legend Bryan Cranston.
Yes, yeah. It was not good. It was not good at all. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be like grim dark or if it wanted to be like Power Rangers. And it was weird. Have you seen the movie?
I've not seen that movie. I will say when I was much younger, I watched Power Rangers. I remember watching Power Rangers. And then after episodes, I would karate kick my brother all the time and pull some Power Rangers moves. And then my parents made me stop watching Power Rangers because I would keep doing all of these karate moves and beating up my brother afterwards. So I was no longer allowed to watch Power Rangers, never got back into it when I was old enough to make those kind of decisions for myself. And it hasn't been an IP that, other than this memory of, hey, you can't watch that because you keep kicking your brother, that I have a lot of ties to. That being said, plenty of people do. It has made a little shy of $300,000 as of the time of this recording of its $100,000 goal. There are a wide array of pledge levels. There's a $75 pledge, which this model has always been interesting to me with minis games. That gets you the base game, but no Kickstarter exclusives. So none of the things that are unlocked through the campaign, no stretch goals, no nothing. If you want the Kickstarter exclusives and the base game, great. Pledge $90, which is the MSRP of the game as well. You could get 2 expansions with it and Kickstarter exclusives if you pledge at $150. Or if you want to just dive feet first, you have the $240 all-in pledge for everything they are going to be making for this fun, fantastic thing. Sean, is this something that appeals to you?
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't think
That's all I got to say. I have nothing to add to this conversation.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I don't have much to add either, despite the IP having some small amount of nostalgia, and the designer making games that I actually enjoy. It's gonna have to be a pretty special minis game to get me to back a Kickstarter game that has minis in it. That alone has me shy away just based on my personal gaming tastes. Let me turn around and look at my shelf to see how many games I have that have minis in them. I don't think I have any. So,
okay, terrific.
Yeah. I don't think I have a single minis game. I think the closest thing I would get is if I ever bought Scythe, which I need to buy or pick up in some form or fashion at some point. That would be the closest thing I'd have to a minis game. So, sorry, Renegade, I love you. Not going to get my pledge. Not that you need it. Like I mentioned, it's selling pretty well on Kickstarter there. Again, a little shy of $300,000. It ends September 6th, so not a ton of time after the time of this recording podcast when it goes live to jump in if you are a Power Rangers superfan or interested in this game in particular. All right, that's Power Rangers, Heroes of the Grid, and that's a look at the news.
The war lasted 1 hour and 45 minutes. No one remembers who fired first, but the outcome was worse than even the starkest of projections imagined. The simultaneous detonation of so many weapons attacked the planet on a subatomic level, scouring the atmosphere, boiling the seas, and turning forests to ash. To operate and survive in this new hostile environment, powerful walking war machines were created.
Critical Mass is a game of hardcore, heavy-hitting mech-on-mech combat. As the pilot of a massive war machine, you must head out into the irradiated wastes and face down the unworthy upstarts who dare to challenge your dominion. After all, the honor of your Survivor Enclave is riding with you. Featuring simultaneous play with mech customization on the fly, the tension is sure to stay high in every fast-paced combat until the final armor plate is incinerated.
Critical Mass is the latest in the Dice Tower Essentials line from Arcane Wonders. Be sure to keep an eye out for it later this year.
It's not a blunder if you go with Arcane Wonders. You can find all their awesome titles at arcanewonders.com.
So Alex, you're coming up in the world. You got yourself a new game table. Wait a minute, it's not quite a game table, is it?
Well, it might as well be for all intents and purposes. It's a game topper. It's a Watson model game topper. It's perfect for game night. Plenty of room for people to play. Really upgrades the whole look and feel. Turns what's normally just a typical dining room table into the perfect gaming space. So I love my Watson, and I'm sure plenty of other people out there do too.
So let me get this straight. You get the best of both worlds. You get your conventional dining table plus an amazing game table all in one.
It's like Christmas in July.
Well, that Berkey is one innovative dude, and I'm excited at some point to play on your game topper.
Well, you got to come out here to St. Louis and come visit me for AlexCon. That's Game Toppers. You can learn more about them at GameToppersLLC.com.
Hey Alex, have you ever wondered what trolling would look like as a board game?
I haven't. I think it would be a lot like Nothing Personal, but...
Okay, well, it's interesting that you say Nothing Personal, designed by Tom Vasel, because Trade on the Tigris is a game that was designed to troll Tom Vasel about trading on the Mediterranean.
Oh, there you go. Trade on the Tigris is a brand new game from designers Ryan Sturm and Jeff Engelstein. In it, players will develop cities, trade with one another, and watch as the interactions you have will cause the sharing of philosophies between cultures. The very core belief of your city may change because of this, so you'll need to adapt and grow to score the most points to win the game.
Trade on the Tigris will have a grid release later in 2018, but TMG has airshipped in a small number of copies to be sold exclusively at Gen Con. And TMG is excited to show off this awesome game at one of the biggest conventions in the world.
If you can't make it to Gen Con, you can always check out all of TMG's awesome titles at their website, playtmg.com. Tasty Minstrel, delicious games. This week, we're taking a trip out to Big Sky Country, a land of cattle, ore, wheat, and pumpkins as currency? We're talking Montana.
So Montana is the first of the games we're going to be reviewing today, designed by Rudiger Dorn. This was originally published overseas by White Goblin Games, and then Big Kids Games has brought it over here to the US. And in Montana, you are playing a pioneer with that settling spirit. You're not like settling for something, but you're out like settling the land. You've settled for Montana. Welcome to Montana. No, so it's halfway through the 19th century, and you're trying to build the settlements. In fact, you're trying to build all of your settlements before the other players do. There is a bit of a worker placement element here. There's a bit of an auction element here. And hey, Alex, do you want to roll some dice?
I do like rolling dice, Sean.
Well, okay. Well, you're not doing that, Alex.
Well.
You're also not drawing cards. You are spinning a spinner, Alex.
Ooh.
You're spinning a spinner. So basically, you have this map laid out for you. It's a modular map. And in order to lay out your settlements, certain areas of the map cost certain resources because there's a resource management element of this game. And there are certain spaces that are going to give you some bonuses, certain spaces that will allow you to lay out 2 of your settlements at once instead of the one. And so there's some interesting jockeying for position in order to get the spaces that you need that match with the things you're good at getting, and also get some of these bonuses and things like that. Now, the main way you're going to do this is by taking some worker placement actions, and there are different colors of workers. These different color workers are better at doing certain things. So some are better at getting ore, some are better at getting wheat, some are better at getting pumpkins. And one of the actions that you can take is to recruit, where you spin the spinner to get a certain number of workers, a certain color of workers, depending on what you spin. However, you can also spend some wheat that you've accumulated to monkey with that a little bit, so you have a little bit of mitigation and control. Another action you could take is to work, where you send your workers out. And there's a very interesting, so there's different areas for the different colors of workers, and you could spend more workers for certain spots. Basically, you're paying more workers to get more stuff, and the exchange rate isn't that good. So you're better off in one sense spending one worker to get something because you're getting less per worker, but there's an economy of actions that you're saving. So it's an interesting little trade-off there. And then the last action is being able to build those different settlements out by spending the resources to build your settlements. I mentioned that there's also an auction element. Basically, your pumpkins are your main currency because you're going to be auctioning off certain things, but it's kind of it's a light auction where almost everybody is going to get something if they choose to participate.
If they have the pumpkins to participate.
Yes, if they choose to and or are able to participate. And so there's some good ways to get cows, which are kind of these wild things. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's actually a pretty straightforward, I would call it family weight game. Alex, what are your initial thoughts on Montana?
So Montana does some really interesting, cool things. I like a lot of the individual mechanisms here. I think the spinner is done in a cool way. This game can make you feel clever when you've planned for building out 3 of your settlements at the same time and making a big power move. And ultimately, I think where the game falls short is that it feels too short to me. It's a game where just when you're getting this thing cranking, you've spent a lot of time setting up the game. It's a bit of a beefy game. Just when you've done that, it feels like it's over. It feels like it's over in a flash. It's gorgeously produced. It has a lot of interesting, cool things going on. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have a fully satisfying experience because it just feels like it's cut off right when it's getting good.
And we should point out now, Alex, you did receive a review copy of this from Big Kid Games, correct?
I did, yep. And this is the one with all of the extra little fun upgraded bits and the coins. And so I have the best possible version from a production standpoint of this game. It is, and we'll talk about this pretty shortly here, really nicely done.
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. There's a lot of cool things that this game does. The spinner's interesting. I like the interesting elements of the worker placement and trying to get, decide, do I want to spend a bunch of workers to get a bunch of stuff as part of one action, or do I want to, get a better return on my investment, so to speak? But ultimately, it is a very tight game. You cannot have any wasted actions. And I agree with you completely that it felt too short. It felt like, well, and the game's over. And that last round, it could even feel like, well, I know what's going to happen because the X number of people are going to get out their last settlement, and now it comes down to the tiebreakers, and this person is already kind of set up for that. So yeah, I honestly, this is one of those medium weight, more light medium weight, but like a midweight Euro that isn't doing enough interesting for me. And it's gonna like Rajas of the Ganges. It's gonna just kind of fade in my memory as the years go on, Alex. So that's my initial thoughts of Montana. I didn't have a chance to go over the rule book. Did you?
I certainly did, yeah. And in fact, in refreshing my memory, I had played it at Dice Tower Con. In refreshing my memory for this review and getting more plays in, I had to relearn the rulebook fairly recently, just to be able to kind of get this one to the table. And I will say this, it's well laid out. It's not an overly complex game, and I think it does a good job teaching that thing. The one, it's spelled out clearly in the rulebooks, but the one thing that I almost got overlooked is with the spinner, with one of the 3 actions you can take, which is spinning the spinner to get workers. You get the 2 workers it lands on, and then you can pay wheat to get 2 additional workers by moving that spinner forward. And it's unclear, or was unclear to some people, at least in my explanation, that was the case, that you get the extra workers, you have both. It's spelled out clearly in the rulebook. It's just maybe a little more on the graphic might have helped with that. I don't know. That was the only small thing I ran into. Otherwise, I think the references are well done. The rulebook is clear. You can learn the game straight from that, and it won't take you very long to do so. I think all those are great things.
Okay. So you had the super fancy schmancy copy. How was that component-wise?
Fantastic. I mean, the spinner is of a good quality. You know, you get these things with spinners where they stick or they're not kind of completely balanced or uneven or whatever else. This spinner glides really well. You have plenty of these cool little upgraded bits that came with my version of it that were very nice. The little shaped wheat and the little ore, the big ore. You also have the cows looked nice on the table. The workers had some detail to them. That was all very nice. The coins that I had as part of my copy, metal coins. Always love a good custom metal coin in a game. And generally speaking, the production of this, from a component standpoint, I think is stellar. I also think from a gameplay perspective, the components of this do a great job of kind of teaching you how to play the game or reminding you of how to play the game. It shows on the top of your board the 3 different actions you have, but also the free action. It shows where those actions still take place and where different workers need to come from, depending on what action you do. The board where you're putting people out is laid out well and makes sense to me. I think all those things are perfectly clear and well done, and I think from a production standpoint, I thought it was beautifully done. I didn't have any complaints.
Yeah, no, I thought it looked really good. I thought the art was good. So I will say that with the components, what I do appreciate is you have an initial resource, and then it goes into like a refined resource, and it's just a bigger version of that first resource type. What was nice is the size distinction was very clear. So I think of like Voyages of Marco Polo, where you have a resource and then like multiples of a resource that's just bigger, but they're very close in size, and sometimes it's kind of hard to differentiate. That wasn't the case here, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, again, no complaints from that perspective. That none of that held the game back in my mind at all. Oh, and I should say, I also had upgraded canteens. There are canteens in the game that if you build to them, you get extra actions. Right. Those were actually nice wooden pieces that were had different kind of types of wood or grains of wood or looks of wood. Those were really cool. So I from a quality standpoint, top notch. Loved it.
Yeah. So there's definitely some strategy to the gameplay. You're definitely trying to, like I said before, maximize your actions because you want to be as efficient as possible. So like, I don't necessarily want to spin for extra workers until I'm flush with wheat to be able to get more workers so that I'm making the most out of that action. Also, I'm trying to line up, like you mentioned, those canteens, and there's only a handful of them on the board. They're usually harder to build on spots, but then they're going to give you an action you can bank, so you can take action after action. And again, that's really important. And so there were some moments where I'm like, oh, that's clever, but only just kind of.
I think the cleverness of this game is in trying to build out multiple settlements. It's
sure.
Trying to plan out, hey, I want to build this one, and I want to double stack on this one, or I want to build a line this way. That's where I think the cleverness is. It's in the placement and it's in the management of those resources.
Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't super satisfying for me. And it doesn't sound like it was terribly satisfying for you either.
I think I liked it a little better than you did, but I had a similar problem, and which is game length. And what I think is so interesting about this is the design. Every piece of this design, in some senses, is trying to push this game to a quick conclusion.
Right.
Certainly at 4 players. You start with one resource of each type. You start with a cow. There are so many spaces on this board or ways that you can lay down 2 at a time. And keep in mind, laying down 2 at a time in a 4-player game, you just need to lay down 8, and the game's over. That's a quarter of your game end condition on one spot on the board. Now, it makes battling for those spaces, in theory, really, really interesting. But in practice, not so much. In practice, there's sort of a race to those spaces, but it's also I've just kind of figured out my engine to build out 3 at once. Well, great, but this game might be 3-4 turns away from ending, just based on the amount of stacks people can get quickly. What's odd to me, too, is I don't see a good reason for there not to be, hey, build 12 of your settlements or build 10 of your settlements, or start off with fewer resources, or switch it up to make spaces to get rid of the mountains. There's something in this design that I feel like could have been done to balance out that need. I get the desire of having a game that plays quickly, that plays snappily, but literally this was my most recent play. This was 45 minutes, and everyone at the table was like, was it even that long? It didn't even feel that long to us playing this game. Now, there's some parts of that design that come through that are really good, right? Turns are really quick. Turns are really snappy. There's not a lot of downtime in this game. So it doesn't drag at any player count, in my mind. There's limited moments of AP, not a ton of them. So I think that's a good part, that it speeds along. But for as much setup as you have to do to get this thing out of the box, it feels like you spend almost as much time setting up and breaking down as you would actually playing the game. And I think that's problematic to me.
Yeah, and for me, I think I have an issue with a game where it's a race to do something typically, right? Unless it's an actual racing game, a lot of times when the end game condition is basically, not just the end game condition, but the win condition is be the first to do this, and then everyone completes a round, and if there's a tie, you go to these tiebreakers. And we're going to see that with the next Rudiger Dorn game, Istanbul. But if a game's going to have that as the win condition, it's got to have something else for me. And this didn't have it. Even like, I'm going to go back to Rajas the Ganges, because it also had a race, right? Be the first, not the first necessarily, but intersect your 2 different tracks. And typically the first person to do that is the one that's going to wind up winning. And that wasn't satisfying to me either. Although when we start talking about Istanbul, the dice game, I do feel satisfied by that. And I think there's some different reasons there. So, some of the things I had thought of just made the game more complex. Or I should say some of the things I had thought of that would have made me like this game better made it unnecessarily complex, because that's not what Mr. Dorn was necessarily going for. Like you were saying, he was looking for this kind of light, streamlined game, and I don't think it's necessarily an issue of I prefer heavier games, and this game needed to be more complex, but for the amount of effort you put into setting it up and breaking it down and then going through the motions, it felt too quick and a little too light for what you're doing.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Did you find the auction piece of this satisfying?
A little bit, because for the most part, like I said, everybody can get something if you've got the pumpkins, right? So it wasn't a terribly cutthroat auction, which I think would feel very wasted given how efficient you need to be in this game. So I think it was fine. But
okay.
Yeah. Everything just felt on like, a razor's edge. And if you were inefficient, you're out of the game. And so maybe, it's a turn away, or I'm a turn away from getting pumpkins. And boy, I hope someone doesn't initiate an auction right now, because I'm not in the position to get what I need. But if we wait one more round, I'll be flush with pumpkins. But yeah, it was fine. You'll probably hear that again from me.
It was interesting to have pumpkins as the auction commodity. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about this in theme, but that seemed like an odd thing as opposed to money. Typically, you think of an auction and money's going to be what's up for grabs, and it's not the case in this game. Now, I get what he's trying to do. He wants to have, since ore and stone are harder to get, they pay out less when you're putting your workers out there. Wheat you at least can use to get extra workers, and pumpkins serve this purpose of working on the auction. I found it was all too easy, though, to be pumpkin poor and not in a good position to kind of change your game around to get pumpkins, especially because once you get pumpkins, your best bet might be to play him out onto the board to build his settlements. So it seemed like it didn't have you in a position, some cases, to actually participate in the auction. I found it was actually more limited and wasn't as satisfying as I wanted it to be. So I actually didn't dig this one as much. Dig that mechanic. I thought it had great potential, but in practice it just didn't play out as well as I wanted it to.
So I thought there were a couple interesting things that this game did. The resources are finite, and if you are required to take resources of a certain type and there aren't enough in the supply, everybody has to give up one of that type of resource. I thought that was interesting, right? That was something a little bit different, a little bit interesting. That was like, oh, okay, I can appreciate that. That's kind of cool, and that's something that you did kind of have to watch out for. At least I did from time to time. And there was, like, for example, you could mitigate which workers you have because you could send extra workers as kind of wild workers to certain spots. And so there's definitely some good design decisions. There we go. Design decisions there. But yeah.
Well, and I liked how worker placement's handled in this too. This idea of when someone's taking up a space, it's blocked until all of those spaces are taken up. I thought that was interesting and well done. And yeah, I enjoy some of the mitigation here, even though it has some random elements, aka the spinner. It handles that well. There are elements of this game that are really well designed and that I really enjoy. And I tend to enjoy shorter games, Sean.
Sure.
So this tends to be in my wheelhouse. And you're right. It's just something a little short here. So. Let's talk about theme. Sean, did you feel like you were a pioneer building settlements out on the West?
Sure. Yeah, why not? Yeah,
okay.
I suppose. I'm trying to get the right types of resources because certain pieces of land, different pieces of land have different requirements and needs, and you're expanding from previously built settlements that you're all building together. Yeah, ish.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, I think it felt as thematic as these kinds of Euros tend to feel. The pumpkin-based economy to me is delightful, but also a little confusing. But hey, why not? So
I guess my question would be, why Montana? Why not South Dakota? Why not Wyoming? Why not? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, what is it about Montana? And maybe we have some listeners in Montana that will be very offended right now, and I apologize for that. But I'm just curious what makes this a game about Montana as opposed to any of the other states in the area that had similar pioneer rushes.
They really valued pumpkins there.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, Montana's the pumpkin state.
That's right. Everyone knows that.
Is it? I don't know. I don't know that that's true at all.
It certainly is not the pumpkin state as far as I know. I don't know. Hang on, I'm going to do a little quick research while you read off some comments from the guild. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm going to do some research.
I could also just, hum my little made-up songs.
No. Read the comments.
So Chris Holmes said, I've played Montana a few times now since picking up at Dice Tower Con. While it has cows, it is not a heavy Euro. Players have to be clever in order to win, but not super clever. Once all the players reach that same cap of cleverness, Montana becomes more of a resource pusher than anything. Montana has excellent table presence, and I like the spinner and being able to double its effectiveness by spending a grain. Montana is less a gamer's game and more of a Kennerspiel game, that is, a game for the whole family where the children in that family are 11 or so years old. Heavier games that share a similar motif are Railways of the World, Carson City, Homesteaders, Discoveries, Dicetown, and Hacienda. And absent any teenagers, I'd prefer to play those other titles instead. Still, Montana is good enough to keep in my library and earns a 4 on the Ducal scale.
Okay. I have some breaking pumpkin news.
Oh, excellent.
The top pumpkin producing states in the U.S. are Illinois,
Okay.
Indiana, Ohio,
Okay.
Pennsylvania, and California.
Okay. Not Montana.
The trick with pumpkins is they are sensitive to the cold, and so in certain parts of Montana where it gets very, very cold, not so great. But I wouldn't say it's a bad pumpkin growing state, as far as I can tell. I'm certainly no agricultural expert. But I will say there weren't a lot of states in that region on that list. So take that as you will.
Fair enough. So Brett Mowers says, I really like this one. From the components, artwork, and title, it screams medium weight Euro. Then you see the spinner, then you realize it's a race game, then you realize you're not in Montana anymore. It plays quickly and looks great on the table. A 4 for me.
The Mr. Sean, with a very Sean phrase here, he says, quote, it's a fine game. There's nothing really to complain about, but after one play at Dice Tower Con, it was clear it wouldn't have a lot of replayability for me. Not a bad game at all, just not for me. A solid 3. And that's one concept we haven't talked about a lot, Sean. Replayability. Certainly, I think there's not much variability in this game, right? The variability comes from the starting setups of tiles on the board, and to a very lesser degree, the 4 starting workers you get. Beyond that, there's not a ton of variability there. Does it hold a lot of interest as far as replayability goes? And this kind of leads right into our final thoughts. I'll go first in answering that question, Sean. I don't think there is. I just don't know how many times I'm gonna pull this one out. Partly the hassle of the setup and compared to how much game time I'm going to get in is going to keep me from getting this to the table as often. It's just too short for what it wants to be. And there are some design decisions in here that push it that way that I'm not sure about. I'm not sure why those were made. Now, that being said, I think the components, the artwork, the rulebook, the production of this is stellar. And the game itself is going to be reasonably easy enough to teach to gateway gamers. And there's nothing that says about this game that says to me, I don't want to play this again. It's a perfect 3. This is a quintessential 3 for me, Sean. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. That's where I feel about it. If it's in my collection a year from now, awesome. I don't know how many times I'm going to end up playing this, and I don't know how long this thing's going to stick in my memory afterwards. So that's where I'm at. My guess is you're in a similar spot, Sean.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to say I will refuse to play this game. I just don't see myself ever playing this game again. It was very inoffensive. Kind of like the Mr. Sean said, there's nothing to complain about here. I thought it was good. I enjoyed myself, but I'm good. It's a 3 as well. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation, but man, it's a very narrow set of situations where I'd be willing to play this. So, but I can't give it a 2. I just can't give it a 2. So that does not feel. Yeah, it's not a 2. For folks who don't know, by the way, we rate games here at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale. So a 1 being terrible, bad, 6 being all-time favorite. A 3, this tends to be the difference between a 3 and a 4 for us tends to be, we'll play it again, but don't necessarily care if anyone in our play group or ourselves owns it. Difference between a 2 and a 3 tends to be, I will never play this again versus, I'll play this again. So that's where it sits. We both gave it a 3. So yeah, that's Montana. What happens when you convert a classic, a Kennerspiel winner, and turn it into a dice game? Does it still hold up? We'll tell you in our review of yet another Rudiger Dorn game, Istanbul, the dice game. Istanbul, the dice game, published by AEG, and as you said, Alex, designed by Rudiger Dorn yet again. And this takes his award-winning game and says, hey, let's make it the dice game, which I have mixed feelings about. I enjoy the dice games quite a bit, but sometimes they can leave you a bit wanting. I'm thinking of a game like No Siesta, La Granja, love La Granja. No Siesta, not so much. But you know what? This one, Not too shabby. So the idea here is that you're racing to collect a certain number of red gems, and it's dependent on player count. And in order to do that, you're going to take turns rolling these 5 dice. The different die faces have one of 4 different resource types. They also have a symbol for money, and then they have a symbol for drawing these action cards. And so you're going to roll the dice. You're not going to do any rerolls necessarily. And you have 2 actions that you can now spend these dice. So for example, if I have 2 dice that come up with the blue resource type, I can turn those in to collect a blue resource chit, which I can spend as basically an additional blue die face in the future. Because at a certain point, I'm going to need a certain number to spend on these mosque tiles, which are going to give you extra dice, extra actions, certain types of income at the beginning of your turn. They're very useful. But also, I'm going to need these to purchase some of the gems from the board. So I could spend a certain number of a particular color to get a gem. And then as those gems of that category go away, it becomes more expensive. So maybe I need 4 blue die faces at first to get the first gem of that type, and then I need 5 and then 6. Or I could spend a bunch of different ones because there's a different track from which I can buy gems, but again, those become more expensive. Or I could spend money. Or I could be not the first, but I could get 4 or 5, depending on the player count, mosque tiles to give me gems. And so there's some really interesting things you're doing with these dice. There's always something you can do more or less. So I talked about I could spend 2 of the same to get an extra chit. I can spend 2 different ones to get a blue crystal, which is what I need to be able to re-roll a certain number of dice if I'm not happy with my results. Or I could spend 3 different types to get a wild tile. Essentially, they can count as any of those. Or I could spend the coins to get money. Or I could spend the cards to draw a certain number of cards and then pick which one I want to apply. And what's really interesting is typically the cards are going to give you a benefit and then give everyone else a lesser benefit. So even when it's not your turn, you could be definitely doing some things and even making some decisions because they might have you spend certain types of resources to get other resources. But ultimately, it's a race game. Whoever gets X number of the red gems first will trigger the end game, and you complete the round, and then it's an issue of money being the tiebreaker after you turn in the various goods tiles that you have collected. And whoever has the most gems and or money as a tiebreaker is the winner of Istanbul, of the dice game. So what'd you think, Alex?
Well, Sean, let me tell you a story.
Sure.
So last week, we had a Gray Fox game night, and Josh was there, and a whole bunch of other fun people were there. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I said it. Monochromatic Wolf game night. Dang it.
Wait a minute. Are you about to Gaia project this?
No, I'm not. I was trying to fool you. No, I totally played it. Oh. I wanted to see how long that joke could go out, though.
Okay, sorry.
No, I definitely played it. No, there's no actual story here other than.
Oh, good.
I was trying to get you to go down that road. Anyway, no, I played it.
Trying to get me on a plane to fly out to St. Louis and strangle you.
Yeah, that would be about it. Hey, look, I told you I needed to call an audible this week, Sean. I know what to tell you. I warned you. You just wouldn't listen. You just wouldn't go out and get a game that's not released yet. Jeez. No, I played it and I liked it. It's another race game, and I know, Sean, you have some mixed feelings about race games. Oddly, 3 of the games we're talking about on this entire show are race games, and as we'll talk about Downforce a little bit later on, I will say this: I think it accomplishes what it sets out to do successfully. It's not an overly long game; doesn't outstay its welcome. I like that there's always something you can do with the dice, and I like that there's different paths or strategies you can build towards. What I've heard, at least from some other folks at Monochromatic Wolf who have tried this, that they found unsatisfying, was it felt like it didn't give you enough of a chance to build an engine, to build a satisfying engine. And I'm curious if that's going to come into play with your discussion of this, Sean. I didn't feel that lack there, though. I felt it. Now, to be clear, I haven't played Istanbul in a very long time. In fact, I think the last time I played Istanbul was when we reviewed it for episode 1 of this podcast, Sean?
Episode 1.
Episode 1. I don't think I've played that game since, and I've mostly forgotten how it works, other than I recall Yokohama having a similar kind of mechanic in that you're moving workers around a spatial board.
Spatial action selection, Alex.
Spatial action selection is Sean trademark term. This has none of that. The dice are supposed to represent your workers. It certainly doesn't feel like that. But in terms of that Ruby race, which I vaguely recall being in Istanbul, it definitely captures the feeling of that. And it captures the feeling of that in a game that itself, I think, is fun and succeeds. So that's my initial thoughts on this, Sean. Where do you stand?
Oh, I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was pretty good. Like I said, I like the dice games, and I think this does a good job. I wasn't crazy about Istanbul. It wasn't something that I hated. In fact, at some point, you traded me because you had this copy. You had the copy of Istanbul, and we traded for something, but I never actually played it again, and I wound up getting rid of it at a Gamer's Garage sale. So yeah, I didn't enjoy the race aspect to it, but here I'm okay with it because it is a bit of a shorter game. It's designed to be shorter. It's designed to be more concise. And so in that sense, I think that's really what I'm kind of looking for with these, race to a certain point type games. And yeah, I liked it. And as far as the engine building goes, I look at it as like in Splendor, for example, you got to know when to build your engine and you got to know when to switch over to scoring points. And I'm not good at that. But I wouldn't mind if it was maybe a higher, like 1 gem higher threshold at each player count. I wouldn't be super against that. And I don't know that it would necessarily affect balance at all. But we could talk more about that in gameplay.
What do you mean by 1 gem higher? Are you talking about in terms of cost to buy the initial rubies for those, or for the tiles themselves?
No, I'm saying that so at 4 players, it's the first to 5.
Yes.
So if it were the first to 6,
I see what you're saying. Okay, got it.
Right. But no, I mean, I'm sure that there was a ton of design decisions there and development that went on to pick those numbers. But yeah, I think I always feel like, I wish I could have spent more time playing with my engine, which is what I love about a game like Great Western Trail, which I feel like gives me the time that I'm most happy with doing that. But I think a lot of games, you've got to know when do you kick it over from one mode to the next? And that's important. So
yeah, and this game certainly encourages that and provides some interesting decisions along the way. That decision point's an interesting one. Do I go down this road of getting cards, or do I go down this road of trying to build up a steady stream of tiles? Do I just go for points more quickly, knowing that if I can get those rubies early, they're going to be cheaper? Or do I go a different route? I think this game does a good job of, even when you roll something, you'll have multiple choices in a lot of cases as to how you want to handle those dice or what do you want to do with those dice.
Yeah,
and I found that pretty satisfying. Yeah.
So I think the rulebook was really good. It breaks down the actions that you can take really well. The iconography is pretty clear. It gets a little confusing initially on some of the action cards, but once you understand the symbology that they use, for example, there are 2 types of arrows. There are red arrows and there are clear arrows. Red arrows means you have to spend these things to get something else. Clear arrows mean you just have to have these things, and if you have met that condition, then you get the something else. And so I think that's really clear. And I like too, where on the dual cards, the dual action cards, where you get one benefit, everyone else gets something else. There's a nice little iconography of this is the main player effect, and here's the multiplayer effect at the bottom, a little icon that makes that clear. So overall, I think the rulebook was well done. I think that the iconography, as far as the art components discussion of it was good. And yeah, I think it's a good production, and it's got that same art style as Istanbul, which I think it looks good. I think overall it has pretty decent table presence.
So going back to rulebook, I think the rulebook itself did a great job, as you mentioned. It has a nice clean reference in the back for all of those. Those cards especially was where I found the most tricky. The cards themselves I found the most tricky.
Sure.
And some of the iconography and exactly what you mentioned, the difference between those arrows. This one says you must have this to get this. This one says you must pay this to get this. when you get that, it's fine. And what I like about those cards is they always give you some benefit. Even if you can't do the main thing, it's going to give you a coin, which is not nothing in this game. So it's always going to be better if you can execute the action on the card. But hey, it's always going to give you something. So I like that in that sense, too, there aren't many feel-bad moments, even when you roll the dice. You might not get what you're looking for, but you're going to get something you can use and something that's going to progress you forward in this game. So I dig that. Art and components, as you mentioned, it has that same look of Istanbul, which is what you want in a game that's, hey, based off of that. So I dug that. The dice, really nice quality, really, really clear, satisfying to roll. Came with a bunch of extra dice, which you need in case you get certain developments. The crystals and the rubies all look nice. The board was clean and showed you how to play, those player reference boards in front of you, and also the board itself where you're taking these gems in a nice, elegant way showed you how much does that gem cost. I think it was all put together in a neat little package, and I really dug it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. So what I enjoy is games like this that have that engine building element to them. And that's definitely the case here because you have the mosque tiles. They're going to give you some cool stuff. So they might give you an extra die. Everyone uses 5 dice typically, but then you can get extra. Extra actions is really beneficial because even if you have 5 or 6 dice, you may not be able to spend all of them in one turn because you only have the 2 actions. So having additional actions can certainly help. There's ones that give you income like $3 a turn, or they give you one of the blue crystals, or they give you an ability that says anytime you take an action to take money, you're also going to get a certain good tile. And so when you've got a bunch of those in front of you and you're just raking in this income, or you've got, 3 actions and able to do a bunch of cool stuff, it's a really satisfying feeling. But then you've got to know, like I keep saying, all right, time to grab those rubies.
Yeah. And I like that those mosque tiles are as powerful as they are because they do give you a big leg up, but they also steer you in different directions from your opponents. I like in this game how you have to pay attention to what your opponents are doing at any given point because that interaction doesn't necessarily come directly in the dice rolling, but it does come in terms of which cards are you picking to execute, and also in terms of I need to beat someone to this one, not just because I want to have more rubies than them before the game's up, but also, hey, this thing might not be so affordable pretty soon if I don't move more quickly in this direction. So I like that it pushes you towards a conclusion quickly. And unlike Montana, and these are not similar games to be clear, Montana takes a good chunk of time to set up and break down. This takes almost no time to set up and break down and get ready to go, and you're going. So I found this one much more satisfying from a race game perspective for that reason. Sean, is the engine building in this satisfying enough for you?
Yes, I was perfectly satisfied with it. I think it was good. And the other cool thing too, talk about engine building, was another type of income is you can get some of those action card flips at the start of your turn, which is really cool because there can be some really big swingy things that happen or not. And that's just kind of an added randomness to the game. I mean, certainly you've got to be okay with the fact that there's going to be some randomness. And there's not necessarily...
There's crystals. You can be prepared for it.
Yeah, you can be prepared for it. And if you've kind of stored up some of the goods tiles, so there's a decent amount of mitigation. But I will say this. So I had a game where I had income of 2 card flips. And both card flips that I saw were ones that said, if you have spent at least 2 card dice, then you get something really cool. And you can't do that on those initial card flips.
Yep.
Right? I was like, oh man. So I just got $1. What do I roll with my 5 dice? 1 good type and then 4 card faces, which is just
now you can execute those back to back.
Correct.
You can split the card dice and execute them. So there's a chance you could have hit those other ones.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying it was just weird that like my 2 card flips were requiring those card face values, and then immediately I just rolled a bunch of card face values. It was like the dice knew and were taunting me.
Yeah, but that's the nature of these dice games.
Sure.
And it leads to some great moments, as we've talked about our epic Blood Bowl final. You don't have moments like that without some amount of randomness in there. It doesn't bother me in this game in the least.
No, not at all. Is it thematic?
Is it thematic? No.
Do you know what is on the red tiles? The red, like, good type?
What is that?
I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember.
I don't have the copy in front of me to look at it more closely, but I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah, because I'm never like, oh, let me have the silk or whatever. No, just let me have a red one.
No, it is absolutely not a thematic game in any way, shape, or form, in my mind. The dice represent your workers, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, it's very abstracted. So looking over at the guild, Alex, we had a couple thoughts here. Brett Mowers said that it's a nice version of the main game that plays a bit quicker. Might not be small enough to travel with, but one that I could see replacing the main game to get that ruby collecting itch taken care of. And I'm definitely of that mind. I mean, I don't have a lot of desire to play Istanbul, but I will definitely play this game. I don't currently own a copy, Alex, but I'm going to pick up a copy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
BJ says, I've never played Istanbul, although for the life of me, I can't understand how any game could have beaten Concordia in 2014, so it must be good? Sean, I'll just pause right here for your thoughts.
No, Concordia is so much better than Istanbul.
All right. So continuing on with BJ's thoughts. So I had no expectations for this game. Wow. What a great little 30-minute dice chucking filler. It hits all the marks, looks good on the table, easy to teach, multiple ways to win, plays quickly. Yeah. Echoes my thoughts. I think he's right. Spot on. Yeah. So Sean, what does that translate to as far as the score goes?
Yeah. So again, looking at our 6-point scale, it's not a 6 for me by any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not a 3. I knew it was going to be either a 4 or a 5. So let's talk it through. 4 is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. 5 is a great game, will rarely turn down a play of it. So here's what I'm thinking, Alex. Gone Shown Clever. Man, that game is good. That is a great little dice game, a great little roll and write. Oh, it's super. It is a fantastic game. So if I'm thinking of a 30-minute game, maybe less, that requires a good amount of dice rolling, I'm thinking of Gone Shown Clever first. Thinking of other games that have been converted into the dice games, like Castles of Burgundy, the dice game.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, this is a much better the dice game than that. No Siesta, like I mentioned before. No, I think this is better. I'm gonna give it a 4, Alex. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. It's definitely a high 4. And I'm curious to see if I'm going to bring this out often or not. I don't know. I feel like had I not played Gone Shown Clever so much recently, I probably would have given this a 5. But we don't score games in a vacuum. At least I don't. And so I've got to think, how often am I going to actually be pulling this out and thinking of this to play? But I think it's good. I really think it's worth a look. If you liked Istanbul, give this a try. If you weren't crazy about Istanbul, give this a try, because it's solid and I like it. So it's a 4 for me. High 4.
It is amazing to me sometimes how even playing in different contexts, different places, I always used to worry that we were influencing each other too much on reviews, but we're on the exact same page on both games this week, Sean.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you with Istanbul, the dice game. And I think this is odd. You always talk about like a filler score versus a normal score, or a dexterity score versus a normal score. Is there a separate dice game score that this would be a 5 in? Maybe. I guess.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But you're right. I have a hard time putting great game on this. I just didn't quite capture me quite that much to get there, but a 4 feels too low for it too.
Yeah.
So a high 4 is about where I settle too. When you said high 4, that's what resonates with me the most. And I'm right there with you, Sean. It does a lot of things really successfully. It plays quickly, looks great on the table, multiple paths to victory, as BJ said, and it's satisfying. It's a satisfying race game that is over and done with quickly and leaves a nice taste in your mouth. Doesn't overstay its welcome, and really, I don't know if I'll be playing this a ton, and that's maybe part of the reason I'm with you and hesitating on having this thing higher. But I think it's worth checking out and worth picking up if you have any interest in this at all, or if any of this resonated with something you think you need to have in your collection. So, yeah, I'm right there with you, Sean. High 4.
So the only thing that we're not in agreement, I'm not going to say that it leaves a nice taste in my mouth.
No?
No. Is that
you
a
tried
thing?
sucking on those dice? They look like nice little sugar cubes there.
Okay. I've never heard that, Alex. I've never heard someone say it leaves a nice taste in my mouth.
Well, it's first time for everything, Sean.
Yeah, I guess.
Family show.
Yeah. A game that leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Okay.
But I don't know, is it the converse or the inverse? I don't know. I think it's the converse. I'll have to go back to my LSAT.
The Dukes of Dice brought to you by Converse. Anyway.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the Duke's second review today of Istanbul, the dice game, a pair of high 4s from both Sean and Alex.
High 4.
No thumbs.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, finally this week, we've got a Dukes Sextuple Take, which means we've been slacking and it's time to catch up. The first one we're going to be talking about is from episode 156, Cindy 500. Called as much because this was our Gen Con episode last year and kind of a farewell of sorts because I drove straight to St. Louis from there, Sean.
Yeah.
Straight to St. Louis to start. And it's been a year at Monochromatic Wolf, so happy anniversary to me, I guess.
Oh, yeah. That's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. So first up, we'll talk about Downforce. We talked about a pair of restoration games on that episode. Sean, at the time, you gave this one a 5, and you said this one has a purity to it that Camelot just doesn't have, and for that reason, you liked it a lot. I gave this one a 4, with some sort of comment along the lines of it needs jumps and spins.
Yeah, you said you would have liked it more if there were a little more going on in the trick department, in the Mario Kart department, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting. Huh.
So yeah, so we've been talking about race games in the sense that you're racing to an objective. Here, this is an actual racing game in that you're Formula One cars racing around a track, an actual race. And this got a lot of comparisons to Camel Up, which because they both have racing and betting involved. Although in Camel Up, you don't necessarily have you don't own a camel. Whereas here, you're going to own at least one car, depending on the player count. And there's betting, but there's also agency. In Camel Up, it's completely random what the camels do. Here, you have some control of how things happen, how the cars move, but you're moving multiple cars with your card play. You're using the cards to bid on the cars. Oh, I remember that now. I remember we kept having to make sure we enunciated car versus card quite a bit in this episode.
Yep.
And so use them for auctions in the beginning of the game to determine which cars you get with your cards. And then you use them to actually move the cars in hopefully a very tactical way that's going to put your particular card in good position. But then you're also making bets on who you think is going to win the race at various checkpoints in the race itself. Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I still think it's fantastic. I'm going to keep this at a 5, and I have not even gotten a chance to play the expansion, which you have, Alex.
I have.
So has this made it from a 4 to a 5 in your mind?
So let's talk about this on a couple fronts. It's Sean, and I can't remember if you said this, and if you did, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening carefully enough. Have you played this since?
Yes, I have several times.
Okay, I have played this since a lot too. And, ton of contexts, mostly at Jamie's house. Jamie likes this game a good amount, and it seems to work well as an end of kind of a nightcap, or even a filler. It's since it works with great at pretty much all player counts it plays. It fits beautifully in that range. It doesn't take a ton of time to play. It doesn't take a ton of time to set up, and is really satisfying. And yeah, I did play the expansion. Just one of the tracks. I haven't played the other track. I played the sort of F-Zero-esque track to this one, which has a lot of, loops and spins. It literally has a loop in the track that you have to kind of follow around and go forward with. The other side of the track has rocky terrain that you can try and go around people in, but be careful. It also adds new abilities, which mixes up and adds more variability to the game. Even without all that, Sean, this one seems to keep coming out. It just keeps coming out. And it's so rare for a game to come out in that many situations, or be one that I'll be inclined to suggest in that many situations. And yeah, not only does it jump up, Sean, I did when I was building my list just to test, throw it in the mix when I was building my top 10 list to see if it was one that would fit in there. It wasn't close. It's not a 6, but the fact that I was considering it, it certainly moved up. It's a 5 and possibly even a high 5. This game, without the expansion, shines, and with the expansion, boy oh boy, you're adding a ton more variability, interesting tracks, interesting player powers. The game sails along. It's fun. There's a lot of cool moments at the table. The betting's intriguing. I love this game, Sean. I love this game, and it's probably one I should have in my collection, and I don't.
Yeah. No, you need to fix that. Yeah, it's fantastic. And the Guild has some good things to say too. Weeding Han says, Downforce is an excellent game that works for both seasoned gamers and non-gaming friends alike. The quick games feel more like a race compared to other similar racing games. A 5 for me.
BJ from More Game Gumbo says, I have played this a half dozen times or more, and it absolutely fires Formula Day in my collection. Better looking, better playing, love the betting mechanic. I am pumped to try out the 2 new tracks at the next game night.
And then the Mr. Sean says, I backed the Kickstarter for Indulgence, but Downforce is easily the best game Restoration has put out and possibly the best racing game I've played. The expansion maps and especially the new powers make this game even better. Every group I play with loves this game, and it has replaced every other pure racing game for me. Definitely a 6 for me.
And Sean, I will say this. I think this game has potential with the expansions, the 2 tracks out there and the new powers. If I play around with it more, it could get to a 6. Okay. I don't know if it'll make my top 10, but it could get to a 6 in my mind.
Cool. Yeah, I'm very excited for to get the expansion in. Well, that was the first of the 2 Restoration games that we played. By the way, these are both review copies. We should point out when we got them a year ago. So Indulgence is a trick-taking game where the rules are constantly changing round to round. I gave this a 4, and Alex, you gave this a 4. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. I love trick-taking games. They're one of my favorite styles of card games, and this kept things interesting because whereas in most trick-taking games, there's a similar or really the same objective every turn, this game lets you change it up every round, where you're trying to collect a certain type of suit, or maybe not collect a certain type of suit, or collect a certain value of cards, or not collect certain value of cards, or be, the first to do something, or not the last to do something. And that change in how you value things is really cool. In addition, there's also the aspect where someone is going to be the Pope that round, and they're declaring the rules, or maybe they're going to be, what was it, the sinner? No, the apostate. What?
I think sinner, something like that.
Something like that, where they're basically trying to do the opposite of everything. I think that this is a fantastic trick-taking game. I think it's so it's probably my number 3 trick-taking game.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm not counting ladder climbing games in here.
Oh, I see. So you teach yous out.
Yeah. Maybe my 4th, because I would say my number 1 is Skull. Oh crap. What's it called? Not Skull, but
I know.
Skull,
I think
Skull King.
Yeah. Skull King.
Skull King. I should know my favorite trick-taking game. Then Diamonds by
Trick of the Rails?
No, because it's a little hard to teach. I like Trick of the Rails a lot, but it's very niche. I need to play it with trained people.
Got it.
So Skull King number 1. Number 2 is Diamonds by Mike Fitzgerald, first mention. Number 3.
No, not even close.
What?
Not even close first mention.
Of Diamonds?
Oh, well, sure, but of Mike Fitzgerald, no. Sorry, I thought you were first mentioning Mike.
No, I was first mentioning Diamonds.
Oh, okay.
Number 3 is actually going to be Fox of the Forest, the 2-player trick-taking game.
Oh, I love
and
that
then,
game.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then this would be my number 4, which is still pretty, I mean, that's pretty high because I've played quite a few other trick-taking games. So I don't know. Is a 4 right? 4 is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. 5 is a great game, will rarely turn down a play of it. Yeah, I think I got to keep it at a 4. I think if there's 3 other trick-taking games that I want to go to first, yeah, it's going to stay a 4. But it's again, a pretty high 4. I think it's a fantastic trick-taking game. I really like it. What do you think?
I remember really enjoying this game, and I just have not played it or thought of playing it or thought of it much since.
Sure.
And I think that's true for a lot of trick-taking games. We just, for instance, tried one out behind the scenes here at Monochromatic Wolf that really blew me away. Really enjoyed it. And part of the discussion internally was, what's the market like for trick-taking games? Is it significant? Do those games hit the table often enough to really catch fire and sell well? And I don't know the answer to that. I do know that I don't play them a ton, and I love the mechanic. I will sometimes when I don't know what I want to do, or it's late at night and I just need to kill a little time, I'll just pop open Hearts and just play a little bit of Hearts. So I dig the mechanic, and I dig how this implements the mechanic. For some reason, it just hasn't stuck with me as clearly as trick-taking games tend to do. And for that reason, it stays at a 4. I don't see any reason to drop it, but it's just, I remember enjoying it a lot, and for whatever reason, it just hasn't come out since.
So the Mr. Sean says, when Restoration ran their first Kickstarter, I was thrilled that this game was being reprinted. I loved Dragon Master, which is what it was based on. I loved Dragon Master as a kid and had been looking for a copy for years. It's a really good trick-taking game with enough going on to keep it interesting. Some of the rules can still be a little clunky, but overall, I am thrilled to have this game. A 5 for me. So that's Indulgence, holding strong at a 4 from each of us. All right, Alex, the last game that we're going to talk about, episode 157, which was titled The Fog Father. We reviewed The Godfather, Corleone's Empire. I gave it a 3. It made me want to rewatch The Godfather, but I said, you know what? There's better worker placement games, there's better area control games, and there's better mobster games. So a 3. And then you gave it a 4. You thought it was a pretty thematic experience, and because of that, it was more likely to get to the table with some newer gamers, and that the theme alone would kind of give it a place in a collection. Alex, have you played The Godfather, Corleone's Empire, since we reviewed this?
Maybe? And I can't remember if I'm just associating that with I played it close to that point. I don't think so. I don't think I have. Have you?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I didn't think it was likely you had.
No, and you know what? It's an Eric Lang game. I'm a big fan of Eric Lang as a designer, and it just didn't do a lot for me. Everything I just said still applies, right? As the worker placement wasn't super interesting. The area control wasn't super interesting. And I kept making comparisons to Nothing Personal, because as far as a very thematic mobster gangster type game, I mean, Nothing Personal is just dripping with that theme.
And I hate that game.
You hate it. And so this didn't feel even like the Godfather game to me. It just felt like a generic mobster game. And I love the movies. I actually, Raquel and I did go back about 6 months ago, I think, and we rewatched The Godfather 1 and The Godfather 2. Oh, they're such great movies. Both of them are just fantastic. And so if nothing else, it made me want to rewatch those. But so here's the question. Am I going to refuse to play The Godfather? Because if I'm going to refuse to play it, that drops it to a 2.
Yep.
So let me think about that. Stay tuned. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's one of those that seemed to be really popular for a period and just hasn't stuck around for whatever reason. It's just not one you see out on tables a lot of conventions. It's not one that has stuck around, at least in my impression of kind of being around the hobby. And I don't have a good sense as to why. I recall enjoying the plays of this. It's not one, though, that I felt compelled or felt has been missing from my collection or that that I'm missing out on. That being said, I get the critique of it's not fully, it doesn't feel like a Godfather experience to some people. I don't know. To me, it does. It doesn't have the backstabbiness as much as, say, a Nothing Personal does. But it still has those moments of treachery where you're sending in an officer to wipe out an area, or you're clearing an area of goons before moving in yourself. It felt thematic enough, and I enjoyed it enough. And I think the quality of the game has it at a 4, but I'd say it's a low 4. It's kind of a hanging on for dear life 4. Because it's just not one that again, I've seen a ton of and haven't seen a lot of enthusiasm about. And personally, I don't know if I've had a ton of enthusiasm for. But I think the game itself and the theme itself and how it's integrated into the game is worthy. And so I'm keeping it there at a 4, but not by much.
So the Guild had some thoughts. Weeding Han says, a good game packed with direct interactions and secret money stashing, but unfortunately, I've got to say, not a good Godfather game. It might have worked better as a generic gangster game, but the disappointment at the lack of thematic resonance tainted my enjoyment. But he still gives it a 4.
Okay. Brett Maurer says, I feel like this one dropped off the radar quickly, but it's one of my favorite Eric Lang games. Neat elements with an uncommon theme with an IP that's not overdone. Lastly, who doesn't like seeing your opponent's minis floating in a cardboard Hudson River? I dug that. I dug that a lot.
Sure. And then BJ says, maybe my most disappointing game of 2017. Terrible art, mediocre production, except for the suitcase, a complete retread of his other area control games, plus it really didn't feel that thematic. I played it once, and that was enough for me. Pass.
BJ does not hate a lot of games.
That's true.
Those are some strong words from BJ.
Yeah.
The Mr. Sean, also on the same page with Sean with this one as well, he says, another fine game. Area control with Take That is just not my thing. The Godfather theme was there, but not well integrated, and there was nothing really new or different to set this apart from many other games. In the end, it did nothing for me. A meh 3. Sean, are you going to be a 2 or a 3 on this one?
It's tough because I don't think the design merits a 2. So 2 is game has some merit, but has significant issues. And like I kind of alluded to before, we kind of threw in this idea that if you're going to refuse to play this game, it is probably a 2. I don't think I'm going to refuse to play this, but man, it would take a lot to get me to sit down and play this game. It is a 3, kind of like you said with your 4, that's barely hanging on. But I have no real desire to play this anytime soon or ever again. God, I could hear Jeremy.
It's a 2.
Hashtag
Sean,
unleash the 2.
Unleash. Do it.
Oh.
I'm on. Wait, here's my Palpatine. Ready?
Uh-huh.
Do it.
No, the first time was better.
Do it.
Nope. No, it's no, it's really terrible.
Do it.
No. It's no.
Well, let's hear yours. Do yours.
Do it.
Okay, that was pretty good.
Yeah. Hashtag barely hanging on. I'm gonna keep it at a 3.
Ooh.
I'm gonna keep it at a 3.
All right.
But you know what? That's not a very satisfying 3.
For all intents and purposes, it might as well be a 2.
I think so.
It's a 2 that Sean doesn't want to say is a 2 because it's an Eric Lang game, I think.
No. All right, fine. You bullied me into it, Alex.
I bullied you into it.
This is Between Two Cities all over again.
Yep.
All right,
that's me bullying Duke Alex.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
Game has some merit, but has significant issues. Like it's not a Godfather game.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the Duke's 6-tuple take. Downforce stays at a 5 for Sean, moves from a 4 to a 5 for me. Indulgence, a 4 for Sean and a 4 for me. Godfather Corleone's Empire drops from a 3 to a 2 for Sean and just hangs on to a 4 for me.
All right, Alex. Well, that's going to do it. Man, that sure left a not good taste in my mouth.
Yep. Almost the opposite of a good taste in your mouth.
Right.
Anyway.
So before we go, though, we have some runners up for naming episode 183. some pretty clever ones here. This was, I think this was my favorite, but it wasn't the consensus pick. And I think it's, whatever. So Chris K suggested a heifer you can't refuse, as opposed to an offer you can't refuse. I think that was clever. I think it was very clever.
Weeding Han came with a Rollin' America.
And again, because Montana is in America,
Yep.
And you're rolling dice.
In Istanbul.
Yeah, no, I get it.
All right.
Michael Frauenbrook suggested...
By the way, you know what else is in America? Godfather, Corleone's Empire. That's also in America.
Well, but there's a good portion that takes place in Sicily.
Well, where the game is set. The game
true.
itself is in...
Maybe if there were a Sicily expansion.
Oh, okay.
I'd be willing to come back and give it another try. So anyway, Michael Farnbrook suggested Big Die Country, because Montana is Big Sky Country.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo came with Istana, Montana.
How did you say that?
Istana, Montana?
Yeah, your inflection was weird the first time.
Did I put it on the wrong syllable?
You sure did.
Okay, well, live and let go.
And then finally, Nick Hayes suggested Istanbul. Oh, but wait, bull is spelled B-U-L-L, as in like a papal bull.
Which, by the way, clever name.
Yes.
We're an audio podcast. It's hard to communicate the two L's that way.
Yes.
I don't know.
Istanbul. You know, when I hear Istanbul, it really just makes me want to play Paths of Glory, because there's a whole
You know what's
Turkey
incredible
element.
about this whole episode, by the way?
What's that?
We were able to get through an entire review of Istanbul the Dice Game without once referencing the song Istanbul, not Constantinople. Now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 183.
Sean, one last question. Why did Constantinople get the works?
I don't know, Alex. Go ahead.
Nobody's business but the Turks.
Yeah, that's just terrific. That's going to do it for episode 183. Thanks again to Steve O'Rourke for naming this episode Dornforce. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on August 23rd, 2018. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, and Game Toppers. You can find out more about Tasty Minstrel's games at PlayTMG.com, Arcane Wonders titles at ArcaneWonders.com, and learn more about Game Toppers at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you back here in 1 week. Until then, game on.